how to create a modern looking beautiful dashboard here in Excel. This is what we're gonna learn in today's video, and it's an automatically dashboard too. So whenever you just select here a new category, just select here a new option in your slicers, you can just filter here our data to make sure you can analyze your data set in a better way. So we're gonna learn how to do it step by step. We're gonna start here with creating our table in Excel from our dataset, and you can download the dataset. Just click in the link in the description below, 100% free. Okay, just click in the link, download the dataset, and then follow here with me the step by step, because we're gonna build this complete dashboard here in Excel step by step from scratch. Okay, we're gonna start with the dataset, and then we're gonna transform the dataset into a table itself, and then from the table we're gonna create here many pivot tables to help us to create our dashboard, and then we're gonna move on to our dashboard itself. So basically we have here three different steps. The first one is to create a table, and then pivot tables, and then the dashboard itself. Let's find out now how can we do it step by step from scratch. Let's go. Let's start with the first step, that is to transform our dataset into a table itself. However, before we do it, let's make some changes here to make sure our dataset is ready to be transformed into a table itself. The first thing here in the spreadsheet, I want to right click it and I go rename it. So for example, I can just type it in, let's say table, enter, or dataset, or whatever. So I'm going to stick with table here. Okay, so this is my dataset where I have my table in Excel. Then I want to make sure I understand everything that I have here. So I want to understand what type of information I have in each one of the columns. For example, what is this data set? So this data set is a sales report where I have my order ID, my date, my item name, category, item ID, the quantity sold, the unit price, the total price, the customer name, the customer ID, and the states. However, that is something that is not that good. Look, the size of the column is smaller than the text itself. So there's many text here, many informations that I can not even read it complete. So for example here, the customer name, I cannot even see this entire column name because the column is too small to contain all the text. One thing that I can do here, I can select all the columns that I have, and then in between one column and another, let's say here, column A and B, I can double click it, 1, 2. That way it's possible to just adjust the size of each one of the columns that I just selected before. And one more thing before we just transform this dataset into a table itself is to make sure if all the information that we have here in the columns are with the correct, let's say, formatting, for example. So here in the date, what type of date is this? 45/29/2. I don't know, so maybe it's a good idea to just transform these numbers here into data itself here in Excel. Let me just select this entire column B, and then I go here to the Home tab, and then here in General, I'm going to click and select this option here, Short Date. That way, it's possible now to see the date in the correct formatting, let's say that way. And another thing that I want to do here is to select this entire column G and the column H and transform these values that I have here into currency. So I'm going to select these two columns here, Home tab, and then I'm going to change it to dollar, let's say. I'm going to click here, and yeah, we're done. One more thing is just to double click here to just increase a little bit the size of the column again, double click it, okay. Now, yes, we can just complete the first task, that is to transform our dataset into the table itself. And to make sure it's possible, it's pretty much easy. I just need to click in any cell that I want to click here in my dataset, and then I go to Insert tab, and I go select here, Table option. Click, just to make sure the Excel just select everything for you. Give a quick look here. So yes, it select everything. So from the cell A1 to up to the cell K1521. Okay, it's correct. My table has headers. Yes, so I'm gonna let it check. Then I'm gonna click here in OK. Now we have a table in Excel. And of course, if you don't like blue, you can change the color, the design itself. However, it doesn't matter, okay? It's just a color. You can click here in the table design and then select the color that you wish. I'm gonna let it in blue in this standard pattern that Excel gives to me, okay? Now we can move on and go to your pivot tables. In the pivot tables, why it's important to use pivot tables in Excel? Why should I use pivot tables whenever I just create a dashboard? Because a pivot table is an excellent tool here in Excel to help us to slice and dice the informations that we have. With slice and dice, I mean, we have here a huge data set. You just download it, so you are seeing it. It's a huge data set with a bunch of columns and a lot of rows. So it's a huge data set. And I can analyze all these informations at once. So creating a pivot table can help me because I can slice and dice, or I can break apart. I can transform my large data set into smaller parts. That way I can analyze. So let's say here I have my total sales. Instead of I just look at the total sales, I want to see, let's say, how much I just sold in the January month, how much I sold in the February, or how much I sold in each one of the months that I have here in my data set. I can do it with pivot tables. And of course, I can just specify it a little bit more. So for example, let's say I want to know how much I just sold for the category A, for the category B, for the category C, in each one of the months that I have. How much each one of the states that I have here sold. What is the states that sold the most? So you can actually use your pivot tables to help you to analyze your huge data that you have. Okay, so you can break it apart, you can transform it into smaller parts, slice and dice. How can I create a pivot table in Excel? It's pretty much easy. I just need to click in any place that you want into your table, and then you go here to the Insert tab, and then you're going to select Pivot Tables, and from Table / Range. This first option here, click, and then we can select two things here. We can give a name to our first pivot table. However, I'm going to leave it as this pattern in here, okay, Table 1. And then I can select if I wish to just create my new pivot table in a new worksheet, or if I want to add in an existing worksheet. Here I'm going to stick with the first option, okay? And then I'm going to click here in OK, and we're done. Almost done, okay? We just create our first pivot table. However, it's already blank. We need to fill it up with some informations. However, it's pretty much easy to do. And let's take a look here. When I just select the option to create a new workbook or a new sheet, Excel actually creates for me here a new sheet. So I need to right click here, click in rename, and this is gonna be, and this in this specific spreadsheet is where I'm gonna have all my pivot tables. So let me just type it in here, pivot table, enter, and of course I can just move it just after my table. So click, hold, and drag to the right. Okay, now it's something. Now it's in a better order. Let's say the way table, pivot tables, and then we can create our dashboard in Excel. How can I now, with my pivot table here in the screen, how can I use my pivot table? So there's two main things here in the pivot table. The first one is here to the left of the screen. That is my pivot table area, is where I can see all the informations that I'm just slicing and dicing, okay? And here to the right, I can see all the pivot table fields, I can take any value that I have here and sort or organize it different, and I'm gonna see the result in my pivot table. So let me just increase this pop out a little bit, okay? And here, let's say I have order ID, date, item name, category, item ID, quantity, and so on. All these values that I have here is the same, specifically the same values that I have in my columns. So the values that I have over there are my column: order ID, date, item name, category, and so on. Here, let's say the first thing I want to do, I want to know how much I sold in quantity, the total quantity sold for each one of the months. So let's say I have here 4 areas. The first one is the filters, columns, rows, and values. If I want to see all the months that I have and how much I just sold in quantity in each one of the months, I need to use just 2 areas here. The first one is going to be my rows. So in each one of the rows, I want a month. Okay, so I'm going to use rows as my month. And also I'm going to use here my values as my quantity, how much I sold in quantity. This is my values in each one of the months. And each one of the months is going to be my rows. Okay, so I just need to select, let's say, the date, click, hold, and drag, and release it here in the area of the rows. And I can see that my pivot tables are already updated for me. So I can see all the months that I have in my data set. I have January, all the days of January. I have February, all the days of February, and so on. However, here, I don't want to see, for example, all the days of January, all the days of February. I just want to see the month itself. So I can read it off, the days and the date, for example. So I can click in the days, click, hold, and drag off here to the cells. the date, I'm gonna do the same thing. Read it off this click hold and read it off to the screen here. Okay. Now I'm gonna take my quantity as the values. I'm gonna click hold and release it here in the area, in the values area. Just release and we're done. Now I know how much I sold in quantity from the January month, February, March, and so on, so on. Okay. Now it's pretty much done, our first pivot table, and I can continue to do analysis here of with my pivot table. I can do one more pivot table and continues to make an analysis. But before we do this next pivot table, I want to do something here. Because we're gonna construct, we're gonna build a dashboard in Excel, our dashboard is gonna have cards, it's gonna have some forms of display informations. And for example, this information right here is the total that I just sold in unities. So 8,592 units sold. This number is very important for me in the dashboard that I'm gonna build here. So I want this number to appear in my dashboard. To make sure it's possible, I cannot use this number as it is now. So I need to just extract this number to outside my pivot table. I can do it, just click here in the cell above, equal sign, and then I can select here this last cell, enter. Okay, so whenever I just update my dashboard, update any value here in my spreadsheet, I'm going to continue to have this total number here, this total sale, and don't need to freak out, because if you just update your values, insert a new column, a new row in your spreadsheet, all these values right here is gonna be auto updated for you, and of course the total is gonna be automatically updated too, and this value here is gonna automatically be updated for you. So it's don't need to freak out with this, okay? Now we can move on and create my second pivot table here. Let me come back here to the table spreadsheet, and then I'm gonna click here in the insert tab, pivot table from data/range. And now instead of just using this first option here, I'm gonna use the second one, existing worksheet. And then I can insert here allocation, up arrow. I'm gonna go here to my pivot table, and I'm gonna create my second one here in the cell, let's say D3. Okay, so just to the side of my last pivot table. Down arrow, okay. Now with the second pivot table, I want to know how much I just sold, how much is my total sales per month. I can do it easily, just take, let's say, the total price here, total sales, and then drag and release here in the values area. I can see that is my total, all the sales that I have in the total. Okay, so this is the total a month, all the products, all the items that I just sold in all my data sets. However, I don't need to just see this total result. I want to break it apart by months, let's say that way. So I'm gonna stick here with the date, click hold, and release it in the areas here, in the row areas. And I'm gonna read off the days and the date. And we're pretty much done with the second pivot table. And one more pivot table that I can create here, but before, let me just do the same thing here, equal sign, and select here this grand total. Enter, because I'm going to use this information in my dashboard, okay? And to make sure it's possible to just use this information, or even this information here in my dashboard, I cannot use it as it is, so I need to just extract it to a cell, let's say. Now let's go back here to my table, and I'm going to create another pivot table to make one more analysis here. Insert from table range, the second option, up arrow again, and then I'm going to create here my G3 cell. Down arrow, okay. Now with this pivot table right here, I want to know how much is my average ticket, let's say that way, per month. However, the average ticket, I do not have it in my data set. If we take a look here, I can see I have many columns with values, like for example, quantity, unit price, total price, and yeah, how can I tell the pivot table that I need to know the average ticket? So let's come back here to the pivot table. And one thing that I can do here, I want the months. Okay, so I can stick with here the months. So we're gonna click in the date, hold, and release here in the rows area. I'm gonna read it off the days and the date. I'm gonna stick just with the months. And yeah, I have here all the months that we have in our data set. However, I don't want to use my, let's say, the quantity or the total sold, the total sales. I want to know how much is my average ticket, my average. How can I do it? let's say I can take here my total price as criteria. I can click hold and release it here in the values area. However, instead of using a sum of the total price, I can instead use, I can click here, value field settings. I can change it to average, for example. I can use a sum, a count, average, max, minimum. However, I'm going to stick here with the average. I'm going to click here in OK, and yeah, we're done. So now I have what is my average ticket for each one of the months that I have. But instead of using my dashboard, the average ticket for each one of the months, I can instead just using this grand total here, or I mean my average, my overall average. So if I just sum all the values that I have here and then divide by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'm gonna have here my grand total, or even the average of the average, okay? The average of all the months that I have. And I can use this value to display it in my dashboard. So here in the cell above, I'm gonna press equal sign and then select here my grand total, enter. Yeah, one more pivot table that I can create here. Now there's just two pivot tables left here. So let me come back here to the table, insert, pivot tables, existing worksheet, and then I'm gonna place it here in J3, in the J3 cell. Okay, now with this fourth pivot table, I can see, let's say, which item sold the most. So which item in all the items that I have here in my dataset, which one of these items just sold the most. But here, look, I can use either my quantity or the total price to define which item just sold the most. Because when I'm talking about which of the items just sold the most, I can talk about based on the quantity or based on the total price, for example. But here I'm going to use the total price to define what is the item that I just sold the most, or the item that just bring more money to the company, let's say that way, okay? So I'm going to stick here in the rows. I'm going to use my item name, so I can click hold and release here in the rows area. Okay, now I have here each one of the items that I have in my data set, and moreover, I want to use the total price. So I'm gonna click hold and release here in the values area. Okay, so here we have now all the items that we have in our data set and all the total price that all the total sales of each one of the items. However, one thing that I need to do here is just to sort it in descending order, for example. So I need to just make sure the the largest value is here on the top and the smallest one is here down below, okay? To make sure it's possible, I can click here in this down arrow, click here in the filter, and then I go to more sort options. And instead of using ascending, A to Z, I'm going to use descending, Z to A. And instead of using the item name as the reference, I'm going to use the sum of total price as the reference. And now I'm going to click here in OK, and I can see that all the items are gonna already be being sorted, okay? Now that what I can do here, I want to display in my dashboard what is the item that I just sold the most. To make sure it's possible, equal sign, and then I'm going to select here this first item, enter. And one thing that we don't need to care too much, if you're just using, let's say, some filters in our dashboard that we're going to use, okay, so we're going to use filters to make it dynamic and to make it automatically. You don't need to worry about, oh, if I just filter my dashboard and the most sold item does not update for me. No, it's gonna be update for you. Okay, so don't need to worry about it. If you just filter any informations into your dashboard, all the informations in all the pivot tables that we have is gonna be automatically update. Okay, so don't need to worry about it. Now, the last pivot table that I want to create here is to know how much orders I have in each one of the months. So to make sure it's possible, let's come back here to the table, and then I'm going to click Insert, Pivot Table, Existing Worksheet, Up Arrow, Pivot Table, and then I'm going to place it in the M3 cell. Okay, now with my pivot table number 5, I can use the months. So I'm going to click hold and drag the date into the rows area, read it off the date and read it off the days, and stick just with the months. And how can I tell the pivot table to, hey, count for me just the orders that I have, how much orders I have in January, in February, in March, and so on. Because if you take a look here in our data set, I do not have any columns that is my order quantity, let's say that way. But we can use each one of the rows that we have in our data set as a different order, because look, here I have one order, here I have another one, here I have another one, and so on, so on. So let's say here I have 1,000 rows in my data set. So I have 1,000 orders. I can tell to PivotTable to, instead of sum or to take an average of something, to count the values, as we just did before here. So we can count rows. PivotTable can actually count rows too. So this is what PivotTable is gonna do now for us. So let me stick here, I don't know, with category, item name, item ID, whatever. Doesn't matter, okay? So we're gonna take, for example, the category, but you can take the quantity, item name, item ID, doesn't matter. I'm gonna take the category, click hold, and release here into the values area. But instead of using, oh yeah, PivotTable is pretty smart. He's already count for us the categories, so it's correct. However, instead of using counting, maybe, let's say, let me read it off this value here. Okay, now instead of using the category, I'm gonna use, for example, the total price. I'm gonna click hold and release here in the values area. I can see here that the pivot table are doing a sum. Is added up in values that I have in my total price column. However, instead of using sum, we can use count. I can click value field settings, and I can change to count, for example. And when I click here in OK, you guys are going to see that all these values are going to be updated. Let me just drag here, and I'm going to click OK. Look, all the values now are updated for us. So here I have the total orders that I have in January, February, March, and so on, so on. Now here in this upsell equal sign, and then I'm going to use here my grand total, enter. Okay, and we're done with our pivot tables in Excel. So two main and important things we already done here. Transform our data set into a table itself and create many pivot tables, as many as pivot tables as we need to make sure it's possible to have a proper analysis of all the data that we have here. Now we can move on to the dashboard, but before we move to the dashboard, let's have sure that all the values that we have here are with the correct formatting. So for example, here I have a sum quantity. Yeah, it's okay, it's quantity. But here I have a total price. A total price, maybe it's a good idea to make sure it's appear for us like a currency. So for example, if you are in the United States, you use dollar as the currency. So let's transform it as the currency with a countable formatting. Okay, so let me select all the values that I have here, and then I'm gonna pick here in the home tab, and then I'm gonna make sure all these values are in accounting number format. Okay, I can select it, and yeah, we're done. I can do the same thing here for my average total price or my average ticket. Home tab, put everyone here in the accounting number format. Here I don't need to, and in this last pivot table I don't need to do it too. So yeah, we're done. Now we can move on and create a new sheet. Clicking this plus sign here, right click, rename, and look at the name that I'm gonna give it. Dashboard. Okay, so this is our dashboard here in Excel. The first thing that I want to start here with in my dashboard is to just change the background color of all the cells. So we're going to start here with select a bunch of cells, okay? So I'm going to select a bunch of cells here, and then I'm going to go to the Home tab, and instead of using let's say a standard color that Excel gives to us, I'm going to click here in More Colors, and I'm going to create my own color. I can use these colors that Excel gives to me, or I can click here in the Custom tab. I'm going to use, let's say, literally a custom color. So in the red, I'm going to use 35. For green, I'm going to use 43. And for blue, I'm going to use 53, of course. And then I'm going to click here in OK. And now with our background done, we can move on and make some changes in the size of the columns, make some adjustments. Why it's important? Because it's gonna be much more easier to just displace all the charts that we're gonna have in our dashboard. So let's, for example, we can just adjust some columns here, and that way it's much more easier to know where I can place which one of the charts that we're gonna have. So for example, here I'm gonna select the first column, the column A, and then I'm gonna press and hold the Control key, press and hold the Control key, and then I'm going to select the column E, the column H, the column N, and the column X. Oh, I can even see the column X here. So you can release the Control key, okay? But do not click in anything in the screen. And here down below in this right arrow here, you can click one more time, one more. Okay, now you can see the X column. Okay, so again, you're gonna click, hold the Control key, and then you're gonna select the column X. Now, in any column that you just select, you can click, let's say here in the column N, right click, and go to column width and select it. And here in the column width, you can change it to 2, for example, 2, and then enter. Yeah, now it's gonna be pretty much easy to just adjust all the charts that we're gonna use here in the dashboard. Let me start here with just create the areas of our charts, of our cards. Okay, so we're gonna create here some rectangles. I can click here in Insert tab, Illustrations, Shapes, and we can select any shape that we would like to. But I'm going to stick with this one here, rectangle rounded corners. I'm going to click it, and I'm going to just click, hold, and make sure I'm going to use some area here to the row 25, for example. Okay, so this is it. The first rectangle is here. And in this orange circle that you have, you can click, hold, and drag to the right, for example, to make the corners more rounder. Or you can click, hold, and drag out to make the corners more sharper. Okay, I'm gonna stick with a little bit sharper, like this, for example. Now I can just right click in my rectangle. I can go here to format shape, and I'm gonna make some changes in the layout and in the design of my rectangle. The first thing, I'm gonna click here in the effects, shadow, and I'm gonna select the first option here in the shadows. The transparency, I'm gonna stick with 35%. The blur, I'm gonna stick with 2, and the distance, I'm gonna use 4, for example. I can close it. I can go now for a fill and line. In lines, I'm gonna use a solid one. The color, I'm gonna use a white, and width, I'm gonna use 1. And we're done here. Now we can go here to the fill. I'm gonna use a solid fill and a white color. However, instead of using actually a white color, we can make it a little bit more transparency, like 85%, for example. Okay, now I can close here, and this is the result that we have in our first rectangular. And here we're gonna just fill it up with a bunch of information to display all the values that we have in our pivot table. So for example, here in my pivot table, I have the total sold in quantity, the total quantity. I have the total price. I have the average, the average ticket. I have what is the item that sold the most. So all these informations that I have here, I can display it here in this area of my dashboard. But before we do it, let me just select this rectangle here, Control C, Control V, to make sure I can just duplicate it, this format. Now I'm gonna click, hold, and place it here. Just gonna give the column E, using the column E as a gap, I'm gonna leave it blank. And then I'm gonna use this rectangle here, and I'm gonna just increase to the column M, for example. So to here, the column N needs to be empty. And I'm gonna click again in this rectangle, and I'm gonna just make a little bit up to the row 13, for example. So row 13, no, one more down here. Okay, so right here, one more. And yeah, so the row 14 is gonna be empty. Now I can, again, just make some adjusting in these round corners, makes a little bit more sharper. Okay, like the one that we just did before. Control C, Control V. I'm gonna stick with another one here. Control C, Control V, and I'm gonna place another one here. Let's just increase a little bit here, increase to the right. And this rectangle, I can just go to the column X, for example, and this one too, to the column X. And this one right here, I'm gonna go to the column H, for example. So I'm gonna click, view the column H, maybe here, I don't know, let's see. Yeah, so we're done with the background of our dashboard. So each one of these rectangles that we have is gonna contain one different information. So here we can use the dates, the values that we have in our pivot table. Here we can create a chart. Here we can create another one. Here we can create another chart. And with this blank spot here, we can just insert, let's say, our slicers or dynamic filters that we're going to use in our dashboard. Okay, let's start here with this first rectangular that we have. So let me go back here to my pivot table, and I can use here, I can just follow in this order. Okay, so I can stick with the first one, and then the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and so on. But I'm going to start with this one here, the second pivot table, to just use as information here in my dashboard. I'm going to use this value right here, this total, this grand total that I have, the total sales. Here in my dashboard, to display this information, I can click here in the Insert tab, and I can use a text box. Okay, so I can click here, and I can just place my text box, let's say, from the row 4 up to the row 5, for example. And here I can or just in my row 5, okay, like this. And here I can type in, for example, total sales, for example. I can select everyone here, 1, 2, 3, 3 clicks, home tab. I'm gonna align everyone here in the middle, put it in bold, make sure I just increase a little bit the size of the font to make it possible to read. I'm gonna change it to white, for example, and I'm gonna click here in shape format, and I'm gonna read it off the background. So I'm gonna use no outline, and in shape fill, I'm gonna use no fill. That way I stick it here just with the text itself. I can select this text box, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and I'll just adjust it here just above my total sales. And this total sales that I just placed here above, I can delete everything that is here, here inside. And I'm gonna click in the border. And here in my formula bar, I'm gonna use equal sign, and I go back here to my pivot table, and I'm gonna select this value that I have here just above my pivot table, that is outside my pivot table. I'm gonna press enter, and yeah, that value that we have in my pivot table is already appearing here for me. I can just increase a little bit the text font, for example, the size. I can use in, let's say, 16, put it in white, bold, increase a little bit more, like 20, for example. I think it's good. And whenever I just update this value right here, or whenever I just filter my dashboard, this value here is going to be automatically updated for me. And of course, this value that I have here in my dashboard, of course, is going to be automatically updated too. Let's say here, instead of using a value, I'm going to type it in anything here. So let's say Jopa Excel. Enter. Look what's going to happen here in my dashboard. Instead of just taking the value, now it's going to take in the name that I just typed in. So it's automatically working. Let me press Ctrl Z to return to undo the action. And yeah, now we can move on and just make sure we can do all the others values display here. Second one that I want to insert here is the total quantity. But before I do it, let me just select this first text box that I have, and I'm going to decrease a little bit the size, like 16, for example. And this total sale right here, I'm gonna select everyone. I'm gonna read it off the bold. I'm gonna put it in 12, for example. I think it's good. Now I'm gonna Ctrl C, Ctrl V. I'm gonna place it like in the row number 8, for example. And this value right here, Ctrl C, Ctrl V. And I'm gonna place it in between these two, okay? Or even I can just place it in the row 9, and the value I can place it in the row 7 and 8. You don't need to worry about just change the layout, the design in this text box, because we can do it later, okay, at once. So here I'm gonna use the total quantity, or I can just type it in a short way, total quantity. Instead of using this value right here, I'm gonna change it to, let's say, equal. I go here in my pivot table, and I'm gonna use this first value here. So the sum of quantity, I can select enter. Yeah, the layout is gonna change. However, we can just make sure all the layouts just have the same formatting just after, okay? So we can do it at once. Don't need to worry about it now. The third one that I'm gonna use here is the total order. So let me just Ctrl C, Ctrl V, place it like in row 13, for example, Ctrl C, Ctrl V in the value, and place it here, for example. Total quantity, instead I'm going to use total order. And this value right here, I'm going to use instead equal sign, my pivot table, that is, let's see, the last one, I think, yes, this last one here. Okay, enter. So now I have here my total quantity, total order. One more that I can create here, average ticket, for example. So let me just duplicate it, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and I'm gonna place it here, for example. Okay, I think it's good. Now total order, I'm gonna change it to average ticket, and this value right here above, I'm gonna change it to the pivot table equal sign pivot table. It's gonna be this pivot table right here where I have my average. Enter. And my last one that I can create, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, yes, maybe more 2, let's say. So I can use the item that just showed the most. So we can duplicate it here, Ctrl C, Ctrl V. I'm gonna place it down below here, for example. And here I can just type it in bestseller, for example, bestseller. Instead of using this value right here, I'm gonna change it to equal sign pivot table, and it's gonna be this one right here. Enter, and we're done. However, we can place it better because I have a gap here, area that I'm not using for anything. So maybe we can just place it better. Let's make it, but instead, just before, let's make sure all the values that we have here contain the same formatting. So let me just select this first value right here. Home tab. I'm gonna double click here in this format painter. 1, 2. Now I'm gonna select this value right here, this one right here, this one right here, and this one here down below. Okay. Now we can, let's say, select the name, this text box with the name and the value. I can just click in the text box and then press and hold the Control key and select the value. Okay. Now I go here to the shape format and then group everyone. I'm gonna do with all the values that I have here. Okay. So with the name of the category and with the value. I'm gonna select both shape format, group, and group. Now with all these cards just grouped together, I'm gonna select this last one here, and with my down arrow, I'm gonna click, hold, to here, for example. I'm gonna just move my last card here down below. That way I can make sure I can make a distribution better, just to avoid these blank spaces. Now I can select everyone here with the Control key. I press the Control key and hold, and then select everyone that I have here. And then I go to shape format, align, and then to distribute vertically. Select, and we're done with this first part here of our dashboard. Now we can move on and create our charts, and then we can create our automatically filters that we're going to use here, okay, or slicers. Let's start here with the charts, or we can also start here with our automatic filters or slicers. Let's start with it, and then we move on to the charts itself. So let's come back here to the pivot table, and I'm going to click in any pivot table that I have here. I'm going to click in pivot table analyze, and then I go to insert slicer, and then I'm gonna choose, for example, I want to filter by category, and I want to filter by region. For example, that is here, states. Okay. Then I'm gonna click OK. And whenever I just change any filter that I have here, whenever I just click in any category here, for example, all the data is gonna be auto update for me. But I can see that just one single pivot table is automatically updating for me. So why is happening? Because we need to connect all these slicers, all these two slicers that we have here with all the pivot tables. We need to connect with all the pivot tables that we have. So let me start with this first one here, right click, then I go to this option right here, report connections, okay? And I'm gonna select all the pivot tables that I have. I'm gonna check all the pivot tables. This one right here, okay. Now we're gonna do the same thing for this second filter that I have, report connections. And I'm gonna select here everyone. This one, this one, this one, and okay. Now whenever I just change here any filter, use any new criteria to just see my data, all the pivot tables is gonna auto update for me, and so my dashboard. So let me just select this first slicer, and I'm gonna press and hold the Control key to select another one, Control X, go to my dashboard, Control V. So whenever I just click in any value that I have here, as you guys can see, my dashboard is gonna automatically update for me. I can place, let's say, this first one here, states, just here above, but instead of using like this with all these headers here, for example, I can right click, slicer settings, and I can read it off the display header. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing for this one here. Right click, slicer settings, header, display header, no, thanks, and then okay. This first slicer that I have here, I can just decrease the size a little bit, okay, like this. And instead of using one row for each information that I have, I can just break it apart. So for example, I can click here in the slicer and I can create two columns, for example, two columns. And then my slicer is going to look like this. I can just bring it up a little bit like this. And with the select, I can just go to slicer, for example, and I can use for height, I can increase a little bit, 0.3, for example. Yeah, I think it's good. Or 0.4, 0.4 maybe. And I'm going to take this water slice here. I'm going to bring it down here, just decrease a little bit here, adjust the size, bring it a little bit down like this, for example, and I'm gonna increase the size of the row, like 0.3 for example, and I'm gonna use 0.3 for this one here, so make it even 0.3, and yeah, I done. Let me just bring it a little bit up, and this one a little bit up too, like this, for example. Yeah, I done with the slicers. So whenever I just change any value that I have here in the slices, as you guys can see, all the values here in my dashboard is going to automatically update for me. And of course, I can change the layout and the design of these slicers that I have here. And I'm going to start here with this first slicer. I'm going to click slicers. And as you guys can see, there's many options of design that Excel already gives to you. And of course, you can create your custom design. That is what we're going to do here. I can click here in the new slicer style, or I can just duplicate one slicers that I just have. So let me just stick with this option, new slicer style. And here, let's say you can give it a name. So my custom slicer. And here in the whole slicer, I'm gonna format this first option and I'm gonna put it in bold, for example. The color, I'm gonna use white. In the fill, I'm going to use the same color as we just used before in the background of our dashboard. So here in the custom, I'm going to use, let's say, 35, 43, 53. Okay, okay, okay it again. And then in the select item with date, I'm going to click here in format. I'm going to use this yellow right here. I'm going to click OK. And then in the last option that I have, I'm going to click format. I'm going to use this yellow right here. I'm going to put the font in bold. Okay, and I'm gonna do the same thing for this here. Format. I'm gonna use fill, yellow fill, bold. Okay, and this one right here, format. I'm gonna use bold, fill, yellow, and this one right here, format. This is the last one that we need to change. Put it in bold, okay. And before we just confirm it, let me just select here again, whole slice, format, and in the borders, I'm gonna just click here in none because I will not use any type of borders. Okay, okay again. And why our slicers does not change? We just made a lot of changes, but the slicers do not change itself because we need to click in the slicers and then select the what we just did. So let me select this first one here, and as you guys can see, here is my new design through my slicer. Okay, so it's pretty much beautiful. One thing that we can do here, as you guys can see, whenever one option is selected, I can see that the text is white. However, I want to change it to, let's say, black or to blue. So I can select it again, go here to slicers, click here in this down arrow, right click in these slicers that we just created before, modify, and I can select, let's say, selected item with data format, and I can use here in font. I can use a black color, for example. Okay, and yeah, okay again. So now, yeah, now it's perfect. I can select now this other slicer that I have here, slicer, and then select this first option that we just create. And we're done with the design of our slicers here in Excel with our dashboard. Now we can move on and create, let's say, these three charts that we need. We can start with the first one, creating a donut chart, for example, where I can see the total sold by category, for example. And to make it possible, I can select here my pivot table. I need to come back here again, and I'm gonna use, let's say, this pivot table right here. I'm gonna click in the pivot table, and I go to Insert tab, and I'm gonna select here a chart. let's say this done chart here. Select, I can Control X in the chart, go back to dashboard, Control V. Now I can just click, hold, and place just above my area. Okay, like this, for example, and instead of using these filters that is going to appear here for me, these gray filters that I have, I can select the chart and read it off this filter. So I can click here in the design or pivot chart analyze, field buttons, and hide all. That way I have much more area to work here with my chart. I can select all my chart again, and instead of just manually do all the design and the layouts of the chart, I can click here in the design and I can choose a design that Excel's already give to me. Like for example, I can choose this style 4. I think it's pretty much good. I can rid it of this title because we're gonna not use for now. We can use a text box, for example, to make sure our title have our own layout. But here, one main problem in this chart, I know that the larger the slicer, the larger is the value. The small the slice, the small the value, for example. However, I want you to display here the value itself in percentage, for example. To make sure it's possible, I can select the chart and I go here to design, add chart element, legend data labels, show. But instead of showing percentage, it's showing for me here the actual value of the total sold. So I can double click it, and with this new window that is going to appear here for me, I can choose percentage and read it off the value and read it off this option here, show later lines, okay? And it's pretty much done. One more thing that we can do here is just select our slicers and then go to this option here, angle of the first slicer. For example, you can change it. Whenever you change here the angle, you can see that your donut chart is going to be a rotation. I can let it like 25, for example, and donut explosion, I can let it 5. And one more thing, donut hole size, I can just let it in 65, for example. And here in the effects, I can choose a shadow effect, like this one, for example. The transparency, I'm going to stick with 35, for example. The blur, 2, distance 4. I can close it. I can go to now the fill and line, borders, no line, and we're done. I can close it, and our chart is going to look pretty much like this. One more thing that I can do here is select just the values that I have in percentage. I can increase a little bit the size of the font, like 12, put it in bold, paint it in white, and another thing is go here to the format because I just painted in the white color. So I cannot even see it properly, all the values that I have. So I can just put a shadow in the text, for example. Shadow, select this first option here. Now it's pretty much easier to see, but I can improve a little bit more. So shadow, then I go to this last option here, shadow options, and I'm gonna use in transparency 35, blur I'm gonna use 2, distance I'm gonna use 4. I can close it, and yeah, it's pretty much good now. The last thing, two last things, okay? The first one, select here the legend and change the color of the text to white and put it in bold. And now select the background of the chart and read it off the background. So I'm going to select, click in format, shape outline, no outline, shape fill, no fill. And we're done with our first chart. Okay, one more thing we can do here. Just increase a little bit the size of the donut chart, like this, for example. Whenever you just click in the chart itself, in the donut chart itself, you can see here that you have this plot area or this area of your chart. So you can click here in this circle, click, hold, and drag out. That way you can increase the size of the chart a little bit more, for example, this way, and I think it's good. And we can just now insert it in here the title of our chart. So I can click in the Insert tab, go here to the text box, and place my title like here, for example. And here I'm gonna just type in total sold by category, for example. I can select the area of the text box, clicking Home tab, just centralize, align everyone here in the middle, put it in bold, paint it the font in white, and read it off the background. So I'm gonna click here in the shape format, shape outline, no outline, and shape fill, no fill. That way I can read it off the background and our chart is pretty much done. Whenever I just change here and select a new category, I can see that my chart is already updated for me. One thing here, the values came back to the normal formatting. So to just fix this problem, I can, let's say, select all the values that I have here in this slice, or I can right click in the first slice and clear filter. I'm gonna do the same thing for the second one, clear filter. And now I'm gonna select all my chart, for example, all the chart. I'm gonna just paint all the text with this white color, put everyone here in bold, and increase the font for 11, for example. And here in the format, I'm gonna just choose here a shadow, the first option, and I'm gonna change the with more shadow options here. Let's say the transparency for 35, the blur for 2, the distance for 4. Okay, now I can close it. And now whenever I just use here my slicers, the format, the text is going to keep with the formatting that I just chose before. So I can select here one option and another one here. Now we have the same formatting for all the values for all the options that we just select here in our slicers, okay? Now it's working. Whenever, let's say, I want to see how much I just sold for the category D for the Arizona, for example, I can select here, and yeah, it's pretty much working. Now let's move on for our next chart. In this next chart here, I can just build how much I sold by month, how much I sold per month. Okay, I can use this information. So I'm gonna come back here to the pivot table, and I'm gonna select this option here, this pivot table right here, insert tab. Then I'm gonna select this first graph that I have here, the column chart. Control X, I'm gonna come back here to my dashboard, Control V, and then I'm gonna place it here, for example. Now with this chart right here, instead of using some patterners that Excel already gives to us, we can manually create all the design and the layout of this chart here. The first thing that I'm going to start with is just read it off these filters, these gray filters that stay here in our pivot chart. So let me select here the chart. I go to pivot chart analyze, field buttons, hide all. And then I go read it off the title too, delete. And here this right legend that I have here, I can delete it too. I can read it off all these lines in the background, and of course I can read it off all these values that I have here in the left. However, when I just read it off the values that I had in the left side of my area of the chart, I cannot even know how much the January month is, the February, the March, the April, and so on. To make sure it's possible to see how much each one of the months have sold in value, for example, I can click in the chart itself and I can place the values just above the column. So I select the chart, I go here to the design tab and then add chart element, data label, and then I can select, let's say, outside end. That way I can still have here the values. Now I can, let's say, double click here in these values that I have. I can just close here this label options, and here in number I can change, instead of using general I can use currency, for example, and I can use, let's say, just I can use 0 decimal places. Okay, I can close it now, or before I close it, let me just select here the columns. I'm gonna just use here a gap width of, let's say, 135. Here in effects I can just select the first option of shadow. I can use the transparency in 35, blur can be equal to 2, and the distance can be equal to 4. I can also change the background color. For borders, I'm going to use gradient line, for example. I think it's good. And for the gradient, I'm going to select here, let's say, this second option that I have. And for the fill, I can use gradient fill, and I can also select a yellow color. However, this yellow that just appeared for me here, I think it's good. You can also select it using this second option here, and you can put it type in radial, and you can just copy the same values that I have here. Okay, so the same positions too. But I think it's automatically. I can now close it. I can select all my chart, all the area of my chart, and now I can go here to the home tab, put everyone here in bold, and everyone all the text in white, and just increase a little bit, like 11 for the text, for example. And with my area of the chart selected, I can click here in the format tab and read it off all the background. So shape outline, no outline, shape fill, no fill. And we're done of our second chart. I can of course now just adjust the area of the chart. So I can click here in the second circle that I have here, click, hold, and drag it out like this for a little bit more, like this, for example. And now I can just insert in here my title. I can just copy this title that we just made before, Control C, Control V, and now I can place here just above the area of the chart that we have here. Like this, for example, just increase a little bit. It's going to be like this, and just like this. Okay, I think it's good. And here I can just change this text that I have. So here we have, let's say, total sold by month. We can change it, category, for a month, and we're done. One more little step here. Maybe, look here, these two charts are not properly aligned, so I can select this area here of the chart. I can increase a little bit to up. Oh, sorry, let me just bring it down. Now I'm gonna make sure I can select just the background, and I can move it up like this, for example. Now I can back select my chart and move it up to. Okay, that way. Now it's good. Now I can create my last chart here in my dashboard. And of course, whenever you select any category here, any option, all the informations, all the values that you have in your dashboard is going to automatically update for you. So it's already working. Now for the last chart that we can create here, let's say instead of using a total sold by month, now we can use here the units per month, for example, the total units per month. And I can use an area chart or a line chart. I can come back here to the pivot table and I can use, let's say, my first pivot table to create this chart. So we're gonna click it, insert, and I'm gonna go here to this line chart, but I'm gonna stick with our area one. I'm gonna click, I can press Ctrl X to select, and then I go to the dashboard, Ctrl V. Now I just need to place the chart just above my background, like this, for example. And one thing that we can always do here is just to read off these filters that we have. So let me just click here in the pivot chart, analyze, field buttons, hide all. And one more step is to, instead of in this chart here, create manually all the design and all the dashboard that we're going to use, I can just click here in the design tab and select a design that I like, for example. One that I always like to use is this one right here. I think it's the style number. It's not appear for style number 10. Okay, we're gonna select it, and it is pretty much good aware. And one thing that I can do is just delete this title here, delete, and with the chart selected, I can this legend here, I can delete it too. With the area of the chart selected, I can now read off the background of the chart. So shape outline, no outline, shape fill, no fill. That way I make sure I already have here this transparent background, and I can again select the chart, but with a double click it, 1, 2, okay. I just double click here in the area of my chart, and I can come here to the first option, fill and line. I can choose border. I can opt for this no line option, for example. And for fill, I can select gradient fill. That way you can create a gradient, or I mean colors that is going to change the colors, the saturation of the color through the area, for example. But instead of using yellow, I can use another color. So for example, and another thing, I can delete some gradient stops here. So I'm going to delete one and I'm going to stick with just two. So this one here, I'm going to let it to all to the left, and this one right here, I'm going to let it all to the right, okay? And that one in the right, I'm going to change. Instead of using yellow, I can click here in more colors, and here I can use, let's say, a purplish one. For example, this one right here, or even let me just click here in the standard tab, and I'm gonna choose, let's say that one here, or even that one here. Yeah, I think this one here is good. If you want to copy this exactly same color, you can just copy this red, green, and blue numbers here, okay? Let me just click here now in OK, and we can just make some changes here. So in the type, instead of using radial, I can use linear, for example, and I can just change here the angle because I want to do this purple color be here in the top of the chart and the white color be here to the bottom of the chart. But I don't want to use, let's say, a white itself. I want to use the same color that I just create, so this purplish here, and instead of using the purple itself, I can make the transparency 100% and the brightness 100% too. Now we can just change here the angle. So instead of using 50, 60, I can change it to, let's say 100, 270 maybe. Yes, it's good now. And this gradient stop here to the right, I'm gonna use, let's say, 18%, 80%. Okay, now I can close it, and we're done with our last chart. One more thing is just to add the title itself. So I can copy this title here, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and then I can place just here in the area of my chart, like this, and all to the right too, like this, for example. And here I have the total quantity by month. Okay, so we're done. And whenever I just change here or select another category, another option, whenever I just using here my slicer, my dashboard is gonna be automatically updated for me. So we're done, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions in any subject here in your dashboard about the table, the data set itself, or about pivot tables, or about the construction of the dashboard itself, leave a comment down below because I can help you out. And if you have any suggestions to the next video, give a comment too because I always reading all the comments. Okay, thank you guys for watching this video, and I see you tomorrow. As every day has a new video, I see you there.